All right, so can you all see the shared screen? Does that look good? Yeah, all right. I'll keep you guys visible too. I'll just have a bunch of things on top of each other. Okay, so Buddhism. So last time was kind of preliminary, right? We got to know each other a little bit, remembered what it was like to be in a classroom again. So today we will actually get into some material having to do with Buddhism. So maybe a good place to start is, what is Buddhism? Have you guys learned things about Buddhism before? We didn't really talk about Buddhism yet, but does anybody have any like preconceived ideas about what is Buddhism? So obviously you can type in the chat, you can just talk. There's probably a way to raise hands, but I might not notice. So yeah, feel free to just unmute yourself and talk if you have some ideas. Nothing?
I'll go. It's kind of like a religion, but it's also a way that people live, kind of. It's more than just a religion, so it's more complicated. A lot of people could see it as many different things.
Okay, I like that answer. For some reason, I can't see your name. I kind of remember you from last night. Are you Samuel?
Yeah,
Sam?
Sam.
Sam. Hey, all right, cool. So Sam says it's a religion. He said it's a way of living. That's a nice way of putting it. Um, did you guys take Religion 110 class where you had to think about like what is religion and what is religious studies? You guys remember anything from that class?
I
Did you
remember.
study? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I remember when we talked about Buddhism. It said that like some theologians said it was more of a philosophy because there's no there's not really like a god in some way.
So Catherine, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that's an important point, right? What we're kind of getting at here is when we think, is Buddhism a religion? It begs the question, what is a religion, right? And I know these conversations might feel a little, I don't know, boring is maybe the word, right? Scholars love to talk about this kind of stuff, right? Like, what is a religion? What is Buddhism? But, you know, at the end of the day, it feels a little bit dull sometimes. But it can be kind of interesting, right? Because basically, um, Catherine was just saying, okay, well, if we think of religion as something involving gods, something beyond the natural world, let's say, then Buddhism might not be a religion, right? Because what Catherine's saying is Buddhism doesn't have a central god that you worship, right? Like maybe some other religions that we've heard of before. And so maybe it's not a religion, right? Have you guys heard that sort of argument before? Yeah. Other ideas that might come up are things like belief, right? And so people might wonder, what's the role of belief in Buddhism? Um, and yeah, well, there are a lot of different ways we could look at it. So some folks, especially when Buddhism first came to the United States, it was often being presented as something other than a religion. Now, what I'm going to teach in this class is that yes, it is a religion. It's really all of these things. And in fact, I love that these kind of came up in the chat in our conversations, because this is what I had prepared on my little slide too, right? Philosophy, way of life, religion, all of these come up in what we might call, I don't know, American conversations about Buddhism, right? There is a sense that it's a religion. After all, this is a religious studies course, isn't it, right? So we got to cover something about religion. But then there definitely are philosophical ideas that are part of Buddhist tradition. There are larger ways of living about how to be a good person. We talked about the Dalai Lama last time. He has a lot of nice quotes about his religion is kindness and that sort of thing. And that sounds a little less like a religion and more like a moral philosophy, a way of life. And that's not by accident. You know, when Buddhism first came to America, it was really actually a pretty long time ago, over 100 years ago. We were already kind of in this modern period, though. It was kind of, industrialization and all that sort of stuff. And so Buddhists tried to present themselves as sort of modern, right? And you end up with this idea of a modern approach to Buddhism. But we're going to look at everything. We're going to look at what we might call Buddhist modernism. We're going to look at many different approaches to Buddhism, things that we might call more religious, things that we might call more philosophical, moral, ethical, all of these things. We're going to look at all of them. So before we move on, I want to show you the Temple of Enlightenment. I think I can zoom in on this. Is that easy to do? It's not easy to do. All right, I'm not going to zoom in. I have a, oh, there it is. I can go like that. Okay. Good enough. Has anybody been here before? The Temple of Enlightenment? Somebody has. Who is this?
I've been there. I went for my religious site visit for Religious 110.
You're Catherine. Okay, got it. Sorry, the names aren't syncing up with the pictures. So who was the teacher for your class, Catherine?
Dr. Saraceno.
Saraceno. Okay, cool. And what did you think? What did you do when you went to the Temple of Enlightenment?
I went to, it was like a meditation sort of a meditation night. It was just, I think it was about an hour and a half. And they did like a traditional meditation.
Cool. And did you walk there? How did you get there?
It was walkable. I think I took the train because it was pretty cold, but it's definitely walkable. Yeah, it's like, I think 231st Street. Do I have the address here? I do. Yeah, 231st Street. So yeah, it's just down the street from our school. And so this is, again, something we began to talk about last time. When we think about Buddhism, it might feel kind of distant and far away and maybe unfamiliar in some ways, especially in a Catholic school, right? What are we doing learning Buddhism in a Catholic school? But as Catherine's saying, this is down the street. This is part of the religious community of the Bronx. Maybe you can tell from the architecture, kind of a 1960s kind of vibe, maybe 1970s. I don't know, the circle with the door sort of off center, it screams like 50 years ago to me. And so this Temple of Enlightenment, as you can see at the top, there are some characters, Chinese characters, Dadresse, which basically says it's the Temple of Enlightenment. And so this particular branch, let's say, is also related to a monastery upstate in Carmel. Have you guys heard of this Buddhist monastery in Carmel? Catherine knows about it. I only see some of your faces. I guess, all right, we got some heads shaking, we got some heads nodding, we got some breakfast going, all right, I like it. So yeah, up in Carmel, I've actually never been there, but there's supposedly a giant Buddha statue, and that's another part of the religious landscape of America. So you never know where you might find Buddhism. It's kind of all over the place. Okay, so this is all just to say there are many sides to Buddhism, right? And we can emphasize one versus the other. But I think what's undeniable is there are many different ways of approaching Buddhism. And the book we read for today has kind of a nice story giving us a way for thinking about this, right? And so the story is The Blind Man and the Elephant. Here's a early 18th century Japanese rendition of this story. So it goes to show that this is a story told in East Asia. This text that comes from Udana is a South Asian text, right? So all over Asia, people are telling the story of the blind man and the elephant. And it goes to show that Buddhism itself also spread all over Asia. So what is this story all about? Well, Keown, and of course, Keown is the author that we read for today. He's got his very short introduction to Buddhism that we read for today. He says, the study of Buddhism over the past century or so has resembled the encounter of the blind man and the elephant in many ways. So I guess, first of all, we have to know what this story is, right? So what is this story all about? Did anybody get a good sense of the blind man and the elephant from the reading, or do you want to go over it together? What is the blind man and the elephant
all about. Didn't get the book yet. All right, so this is something we can go over. I think you should be able to see this. Can you guys see my Moodle screen? Yeah, so how do we get the reading for this class? Well, we roll down to week 2, right? And we see, okay, we're reading Kyon for today. Does that mean we have to buy Kyon? No, that means I gave it to you right here, folks. Very easy. I try to make it as easy as possible, in fact, right? So here's Buddhism, very short introduction. I gave you the whole book. I'm probably not supposed to do that, but I did it anyway. So I gave you the whole book, 153 pages. Are we going to read all of it? No, we're not. But I asked you to read 14 pages and then 29 to 43. We skipped the piece in the middle. It's a very short little book, right? In real life, it's like this big. You know, I have a copy of it, and maybe not quite that small, but yeah, it's very, very small. The pages just roll on by, right? Not a lot of words per page. Pretty nicely written, pretty nicely organized. There's a little box. It's, you know, it's very textbooky. So very easy to read, guys. So did you have to buy a book in order to do the reading for today? Of course not. So I know I'm kind of shaming you now for not doing the reading, but very easy, right? Tomorrow, or sorry, Thursday, what are we doing? We're reading Lopez. How do we get Lopez? Do we need to buy Lopez? No. Click. Easy. And you guys get a certain number of printed pages, don't you? Aren't you get like free printed pages or something? Print it out, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I think I said this in class before. I much prefer to read printed materials. I've read all of these before, and I will often print them fresh so I can just write on them. And you might be thinking I'm a horrible, you know, climate changer, and you know, maybe that's true. But at the same time, when it comes to education, if you really want to learn things, you got to print it out. I think that's really the best way. So anyways, if that wasn't clear, hopefully it's clear now, right? I post the reading for everything except 2 things. There are 2 books you're going to need to get. One is this one, and I've already even posted the first reading for that in case nobody has it yet. Again, try to get that by next week. And then Morinaga is at the very end of class. We don't even need to look at that. So most of it is just going to be right here. All you have to do is open Moodle and click, okay? All right, so now that that is clear, oh, I guess any questions about that? We all good? Yes, okay. All right, so we've got this quote from Kyon. What the hell is he talking about? He says, the study of Buddhism over the past century has resembled the encounter of the blind man and the elephant in many ways. So what is he trying to get at here? Why does he open with this story?
He might mean because like for a blind man and the elephant, it's basically like, well, it's like 6 blind men who like they've obviously never seen an elephant, but they're able to kind of contextualize like what it is by feeling it. So that's kind of relates to Buddhism, how like it may not be exactly what Buddhism was originally supposed to be, but it's been kind of changed and conceptualized for people to be able to study it in a more modern way.
Good. Yeah, that's a great answer, Sydney. Thank you. So yeah, we've got these blind men. They can't see the elephant, just like Sydney's saying. Here in the picture, how many we got? We got more than 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That guy fell off kind of hilariously. And so they're each encountering the elephant, right? But because they can't see the elephant, they will each experience the elephant somewhat differently, right? Can you see where this is going? So I think one way to illustrate this is we've got a guy named John Godfrey Saxe, who lived in the 19th century. He wrote a poem called The Blind Man and the Elephant. He was so inspired by this story. Now you might be wondering, Bill, how does this British guy from the 19th century know anything about Buddhist stories? What do you guys think? What was happening between India and Britain in the 19th century? You guys ever see dates and think, what was the political atmosphere in the 19th century? Conflict? Maybe. Was there a war happening between India and Britain in the 19th century? Colonization. Yeah, so that's a more accurate term, exactly. So India was the jewel in the British crown. Have you guys heard this idea before? The sun never sets on the British Empire. It really reached its height in the 19th century, maybe the turn of the 20th century, right? And then it fell apart after World War II. But for a really long time, basically the entire 19th century, the entirety of John Godfrey Saxe's life, India was a part of the British Empire, and all of the exploitation and maybe a good word for this class is Orientalism. Orientalism that entails. Have you guys heard this term before? So we might call John Godfrey Saxe an Orientalist. Orientalist. He's somebody who has studied about India, right, and maybe even portrays India in from his own perspective, right? And as you might imagine, there are some problems that happen when people without very much background and without very much knowledge decide to portray India, right? So let's put this on ice for a second. But Orientalism, I think, is a key term, especially for this class, because obviously, you know, I do not come from the lands of Buddhism, and as a white man studying Buddhism, Orientalism is definitely something we must think about.
The Blind Man and the Elephant by John G. Saxe. It was 6 men of Hindustan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind.
So before we move on, this is kind of an old term. Indostan, have you heard this before? Indostan. Well, you've probably heard Afghanistan, right? And maybe Pakistan, and perhaps some of the other stands, right? So Indostan is just taking India and adding stan there. And it just goes to show India wasn't India until Gandhi, right? Until the 1950s, until freedom from the British Empire. Pakistan didn't exist yet. Bangladesh didn't exist yet, right? All of these were kind of all part of the South Asian colonial sphere. And it wasn't until the end of colonialism in South Asia, then you get India. So the 6 men of Indostan, here we have a British guy talking about India. All right, so of course, this is John G. Saxe's poem. Why don't we keep going with it? Is this entertaining? Yeah, all right, let's keep going then.
Try his mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, "God bless me, but the elephant is very like a wall." The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, "Oh, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp. To me 'tis very clear, this wonder of an elephant is very like a spear." The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, thus boldly up he spake, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a snake." The fourth reached out his eager hand, and felt about the knee. "What most this wondrous beast is like is very plain," quoth he. "'Tis clear enough, the elephant is very like a tree." The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, "E'en the blindest man can tell what this resembles most. Deny the fact who can? This marvel of an elephant is very like a fan." The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a rope." And so these men of Hindustan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion, exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, and all were in the wrong.
Okay, why don't we pause for a second? So what were the 6 things? 6 blind men in this poem, they come up to the elephant, They feel different parts of the elephant and they say, oh, an elephant is very much like blank, right? What are the 6 things they said? Or at least what were some of the things they said?
I can't remember all of them, but one of them was a fan, right?
One was like a fan. Yeah, what was he feeling?
The back. No, the tail, I mean, right?
The ear.
Oh.
And so it's an interesting exercise. I've never felt, maybe have I ever felt an elephant? I don't know. I've seen an elephant before. And yeah, they have these giant ears. If you feel it, you close your eyes, you feel the ear, you're like, oh, this is kind of like a fan. Interesting. What's another one? What's another metaphor that they played with here?
They said that the leg was like a post.
The leg was like a post. Yeah, was it like a trunk of a tree or something, wasn't it? Maybe it was like a post. All right, let's go with that.
I'm kind of referencing both like the reading and then the poem.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So one thing that this exercise shows is with these stories, particularly kind of oral traditions where people just tell the stories because they're interesting, sometimes the details change, right? So different parts might be emphasized in some versus the others. And so, yeah, a post is basically the same as a tree trunk in the end anyway. And so indeed, that's what this guy is feeling here. Any other examples that came out, jumped out at you? We got a tail, we got a trunk, we got the, what is this? The tusk, right? What do those resemble?
The trunk is like a snake.
Yeah, the trunk is like a snake.
The tusk is like a spear.
Yeah.
And the side is like a wall.
Yeah, side's like a wall. And I think the tail was like a rope, right? I think we got them all. We got most of them. Okay, so, kind of cool story, bro, whatever. What is the point of this story?
It's their interpretations of an elephant based on how they feel it. And while none of them individually is correct of what an elephant is, all together they could be when you put them all together.
I think that's a very optimistic reading, Sam. I like that. So Sachs, again, he's our poet, right? John Godfrey Sachs. He has this line. Actually, did we hear this yet? Why don't we keep listening?
Moral. So oft in theologic wars, the disputants, I ween, rail on in utter ignorance of what each other mean, and prate about an elephant not one of them has seen.
Okay. The reader is so nice in that. I had to pass the mic to him. Okay, so what is Sachs's moral? He's talking about theologic wars. What is a theologic war? Is that relevant for this class, Sydney?
Yeah, theologic wars would be like, I guess for this specifically, a country coming in and kind of claiming their religion as like the religion. And so that could be a war of beliefs between two countries.
You could put it that way. I think that would be the emphasis on the war and less on the theologic. So what is, let's change this word, theology. Have you heard that word before?
Yeah, like the study of religion.
Yeah, exactly. And you probably came up with that because we had ology is the study of something, right? And theos, theological, theistic, atheist, right? Atheist has that same root in there. It's just talking about gods, right? So theology is the study of religion, the study of gods. And so a theologic war, as we were discussing, would be some sort of conflict about theology, right? It would be an argument about theology, let's say. So Sachs is saying, so oft in theologic wars, the disputants, I ween, rail on in utter ignorance of what the other mean, and prate about an elephant not one of them has seen. So what is the elephant here in Sachs's story? In a way, he's talking about God, right? Or at least like the world, the universe, metaphysics, something like this. And he's saying, just like the blind men, we might get a little part of it and understand a little piece of it and then say that's the whole thing. But because we are these little blind men, we don't have the complete perspective. Or at least that's how I read his moral here. What do you guys think? Is that an interesting moral? Do you agree with him? So oft in theologic wars. Yeah, maybe this is something we kind of take into religion class, right? Like, what's the point? There's no right answer. Who cares, right? We're just gonna argue about silly things that don't really matter. And there's some truth to that, honestly. In our class, there's not always a right answer. We'll find ways to, come up with exam questions. So there are right and wrong answers. But with a lot of the big questions, I'm not going to feed you the right way to think about life, the right way to think about morality. That's not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to do is to get you guys to think about it, right? And to be the blind man and to think about, what are you feeling, right? What are you experiencing in the world? And maybe we can have our own theological wars. But of course, again, I think for these really big questions at the end of the day, it's up to you, right? It's up to you to come up with your own answers. And I won't necessarily ask you to put them down on a quiz or something. Okay, so I think we got the blind man and the elephant. Any questions about that story? Pretty clear? All right. So we haven't really kind of cracked this nut yet, though. So what is Kyon's point? He's trying to use this story in a little bit of a different way. It's similar to what Sachs was saying, but how can we come back to this first page where Kyon says the study of Buddhism over the past century or so has resembled the encounter of the blind man and the elephant? What's he trying to point out?
I think he's trying to say that a lot of people, when they're trying to study Buddhism or learn about it, they'll take one piece of it and run with that without looking at the whole complicated picture of it.
Yeah, excellent. Colin, right? Excellent. And so we did that at the beginning of class, right? What is Buddhism? It's a philosophy, it's a way of life, it's a religion. And you guys are clearly thoughtful and smart people and able to think clearly, even at 8 a.m. So I commend you for that. We pointed out there are these different sides to it, and we can emphasize these different sides. And I think what Kyon is warning us against is, and really Sachs is also warning us against, is if we take our side and say Buddhism is a philosophy and only a philosophy, we are just being the blind man and the elephant, right? We're holding on to one piece of Buddhism that is undoubtedly there, right? Lots of books have been written about Buddhist philosophy. But to say that's the only piece is to ignore all the rest of the elephant, right? And so again, one goal of this class is to try to get a more kind of comprehensive view. Okay, so it begs the question, if philosophy is one part, what are the other parts, right? And we could extend this question to really the study of any religion, right? What are the different pieces that come together to create a religion? I would be open to that conversation if you guys are open to it. We don't have to make like an exhaustive list, but what comes to mind if we want to talk about things that get included in a religion? We don't even have to say Buddhism necessarily. What are the pieces, right? If we are the blind men and religion is the elephant and we're kind of creeping around and trying to find its different pieces, what are some of the parts that we might find?
I'm thinking like traditions and rituals.
Okay, so we've got traditions and rituals. Very good. So tradition, when I hear that word, I think of things that are sort of passed down over the generations, right? I imagine you guys, at the very least, have encountered traditions. Maybe you have your own traditions, right? That you learned either from your family or even from your friends, right? If you're in like a frat or a sorority, I'm sure there are traditions involved in those. And rituals are definitely related to traditions. So I guess it was Colin, right? What were you thinking when you said ritual? What's a ritual all about?
I guess if you're thinking like, let's say like Catholicism, like a ritual would be like eating the forget the name of it, like the body, the piece of bread, whatever you call it.
Yeah, the Eucharist, right? Yeah. Okay, so a ritual is some sort of action that you might do in a special religious space, right? There's a lot to say about ritual. Maybe we can just sort of leave it there. So I think you came up with a perfect example. Again, in a Catholic context, lots of rituals. The sort of what to say, the stereotype is that Catholics like rituals and Protestants don't like them as much. Have you heard this stereotype before? So Buddhists are pretty into rituals. Again, there are different kinds of Buddhism. Definitely there are Buddhist rituals though. So that's something we'll certainly see throughout the course. And of course, Buddhist traditions as well. Other things, other pieces of religion that we might find, parts of the elephant. Is that a hand?
Like ethical morals and values.
Yeah, excellent. So ethics, morals, values. Very good. Yeah, and I think those are pretty self-explanatory, right? It's just how do you act in the world. John Egan says frustration. Why do you say frustration, John? The wall. Now, are you saying that when you encounter religion, it feels like you're encountering a wall that you can't get through? Is that what we're talking about here, John? Are you making some kind of poetic statement here? Or are you just talking about elephants? I think John's shy. He doesn't want to take the mic. All right, I'm not going to force him. Okay. Any other things? Yes, that's the connection. Okay, all right. So John and I are on the same wavelength. You know, he seems to be a bit of a poet, and I'm picking up what he's putting down. I like it.
Hello.
Oh,
Sorry.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, like sometimes in religion we can get frustrated, and that wall, like the elephant's stomach and his back represent the wall. And even though like for him it's a giant wall, he's not really like running away from it either. Something to
Okay,
add.
so John is a bit of a poet. I like it. So yeah, I mean, I can just riff off that from my own experience. You know, sometimes when we're living life, we might encounter what feel like walls, right? What feel like puzzles or difficulties or obstacles or situations that we can't really break through. And that is a frustrating situation to be in, right? And in fact, what this makes me think about is particularly at the end of the course, we're going to talk a lot about belief, doubt, and determination, and how we could say Zen Buddhists approach all of these concepts. So this idea of a wall, we'll come back to this, John, really throughout. This is, you know, interestingly, is a big part of Buddhism. Okay, any other things you guys want to talk about? It's actually a pretty good list. So the only reason I bring this up, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but Kyon, because he's a pretty clear thinker, like we said before, to really talk about what is Buddhism, to discuss this idea of is Buddhism a religion, you have to kind of come up with a concept of, well, what is a religion, right? And that's actually something scholars love to talk about. And I've come to realize that people who aren't scholars don't love to talk about. So again, we're just going to kind of go through this relatively quickly, but Kyon quotes this person, Ninian Smart, who, as his name demonstrates, he's a pretty smart guy, and he came up with a nice list of 7 things that he says are part of religion, 7 dimensions of religion. So we already covered a lot of these. Ritual, ethics, philosophy, we definitely already talked about. So some things we kind of missed, experience, right? Your religious experience. I don't know if you guys have ever had religious experiences before, but that's certainly a category. And in fact, it's sort of what John was getting at. I didn't quite make that connection immediately, but what does it feel like to be in a religion, right? A practitioner of a religion. Narratives, myths, that's a huge part of religious stories, right? Or religious traditions. And in fact, we're going to read the life story of the Buddha. That maybe is the single most important narrative in Buddhism, is the life story of the Buddha. Maybe you know it, maybe you've read it before. We're going to actually read it in a lot of detail. So we're going to get to know the life story of the Buddha very well. And one reason for that is every Buddhist tradition shares this. There's a lot of diversity in Buddhism, as maybe you can tell from this elephant exercise, like lots and lots of different things going on. Buddhism, it's spread all over Asia, many different developments over time and space. But one thing that remains consistent across is this veneration for the Buddha, right, as an enlightened one. So we're going to spend, at least a couple weeks reading his life story. That's that first book that I've asked you to get, The Life of the Buddha. And social institutional. This is a special one for Buddhists. What would you say is the institutional aspect of Buddhism? What is a Buddhist institution? Does that ring a bell for anybody? Question mark?
I'm thinking like the temple we looked at earlier.
Yeah, actually, I already showed you one, didn't I? Yeah, so Buddhist temple. Buddhist institutions are pretty special because there are monks and nuns. Before Buddhism, there were things that were kind of like monks and nuns, but not really. Not really. So one reason we can talk about the success of Buddhism, because it was very successful, now is not really its brightest point, although you could say it's making a comeback. But around like 1,000 years ago, 1,200 years ago, Buddhism was big, right? From like Japan all the way to Central Asia. Afghanistan had the Baimian Buddhas. Do you guys know about those Buddhas that were blown up like 20 years ago? The Baimian, I'm not positive I know how to spell this. Baimian Buddhas. I might have spelled that wrong. But in Afghanistan, there were these giant Buddhas that were built like 1,500 years ago that the Taliban blew up. Very kind of sad. But it goes to show there were Buddhists, right, in Central Asia. And obviously not a lot of Buddhists in Afghanistan now. It's mostly what? What is the big religion in Afghanistan now? Islam, yeah. So that's kind of this cultural border, right? Maybe you've heard about the Crusades. You've got the Christians and the Muslims having their various battles and whatever. On the eastern side, the Muslims, as Islam kind of spread, following the life of Muhammad in like the 7th century, 8th century, Islam spreads really far and really wide. What does it hit up against is Buddhism. Buddhism was the big thing in Central Asia before Islam came. So lots of things to talk about there too. So anyways, it's all just to say, why was Buddhism successful is you had these monasteries, monks and nuns. They don't have any children. They don't even have a house. They can wander around. They can be missionaries. They can spread the religion. And we see that too. That's also a big part of Buddhism. So, take it or leave it. This isn't like the best way to think about religion necessarily, but I think it's a useful one, right? You break it down into pieces, and I think you can find some element of all these things really across different religions. So, yeah, maybe that's enough of that. Any questions so far? We doing okay? All right. So we've got 35 minutes left. Where does the time go? Here's just kind of an outline of the big topics that we will discuss in this class, particularly in the first part. If you looked at the syllabus, you'll see that this is kind of how we organized the course. We're going to talk about the Buddha first. So we're going to read his life story. And you've probably heard of him before. If you haven't, then let me introduce you. Here's a picture of him. Now, we talked about kind of the iconography of a Buddha in class last time. Remember how he's sitting cross-legged, his hands are in sort of a meditation posture, he's got the weird bump on his head. And we can see most of that here, right? But this Buddha looks a little different from most Buddhas that you will see. Do you see anything special about this Buddha? Do you see anything weird about him? I can try to zoom in a little bit. Zoom in. What's special about this Buddha? I guess this is the good thing about having Zoom classes. We can zoom in together.
Is it that he has like his hand out kind of as opposed to like on his lap?
I like that answer. Yeah, so we saw his hands kind of in a more meditation style position last time. Here he has a hand up and his hand is broken. So it's a little hard to see what his hand's really doing. So yeah, it's a different, there's actually a special word for this. It's called mudra. I don't know if we'll make this a key word ever, but it's a good word to know. So that's talking about his hand position. So that's one thing we might notice. Anything else?
The eyes are open. I don't think I've ever seen a Buddha with their eyes open.
Yeah, so his eyes are open quite a bit more. A lot of the time they're like half shut, and he looks almost, again, like he's meditating. Here he doesn't look like he's meditating. And in fact, this mudra is more of it shows that he's teaching. Let's see, can we zoom in anymore? Yeah. So this is more of a teaching posture. And so it makes sense, right? I'm not meditating as I'm teaching with you guys. And so my eyes are open too. Any art history majors out there? This is a little bit of a long shot. So one thing to note about this is a statue that comes from Gandhara in northern Pakistan. Now, we will look at maps eventually. I'm actually a big fan of maps. But Gandhara is, we're not gonna look at it now because there's no time, but Gandhara is a special place that, again, if you imagine, if my hand is Asia, right, and South Asia is here, India is down here, Gandhara is kind of like the very northwestern part. Right? This might be backwards for you guys, I don't know. The very northwestern part, it's kind of like right where Alexander the Great marched his armies and ended. You guys know who Alexander the Great is? Who's Alexander the Great?
He was like the leader of the Macedonian Empire.
Very good. Yeah, Macedonian. So it's tempting to say he's Greek. I mean, he basically was Greek, but yeah, Macedonia is technically a little bit to the north of Greece, right? And he took over the world, right? He conquered the Persian Empire. He marched all the way to South Asia, all the way to India, effectively. And where did he stop was basically Gandhara. And so when you look at this image, you might think that looks kind of Greek, right? He's got the mustache. He's got these robes that kind of are form-fitting, right? He's got the skinny jean version of the robes. This is not typical of South Asian art until Alexander the Great shows up. And in fact, the Buddha was not commonly depicted until there was this sort of Gandharan influence. So this is, I don't think I give you a date, but this is probably about 2,000 years old. It's extremely early. It's one of the earlier portrayals of the Buddha. And again, just like kind of portrayals of Jesus or something like that, the way he generally looks will change depending on where you go, right? So in this particular image, I would say he looks very Central Asian, right? He's got the big mustache. He's got kind of the interesting haircut. He's got the bump on his head that we talked about before. He's got the Greek-looking robes. And so, again, it just goes to show this early way of depicting the Buddha, this early way of thinking about the Buddha is a little bit different than we usually think about him now. Okay, so that's the Buddha. What is the Dharma? The Dharma is his teachings. That is a pretty common English word. We'll probably see it in the reading. Maybe I'll even write this in the chat to emphasize it. So the Dharma is the teachings. And then the Sangha is the community, right? So we're talking about Buddhist institutions. We already talked about that, monks and nuns, temples, monasteries, all that kind of stuff, right? So this is a set triad, let's say, Buddhists talk about all the time, is the three jewels. And basically, it answers the question of what does it mean to be Buddhist? There are other ways to define this, but very simply put, to be Buddhist is to have faith in the three jewels. And so we might not be talking about having faith in God, but we're already talking about faith, aren't we? Right? The way the Buddhists talk about it is to go for refuge in the three jewels. Three jewels. So refuge is kind of an interesting word. Have you heard the word refuge before? A refugee? What is a refugee?
It's like someone who's could be like unsafe in their home country and they move to another country to for safety.
Very good. Yeah, so someone who's looking for safety, someone who's looking for help. And so in the Buddhist case, kind of an interesting idea. Buddhism almost presents us all as refugees, right? We are all looking for refuge. Maybe not all of us, but a Buddhist would be someone who is looking for refuge, and they go to the Buddha as somebody to emulate. They go to his teachings as something to inspire them, and the Sangha as a community that might be able to help them. So the language of refuge is really, again, an important part of how Buddhists think about themselves. So Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. I think, again, time is a little bit limited, but this is important, and I don't want to skip over it. So again, we've got this image from northern Pakistan, from Gandhara. We've got Buddha. We've already talked about him. He's in the middle. Who's with him? Indra and Brahma. Have you guys heard of them before? Indra and Brahma. Who are they?
Aren't they from Hinduism?
Yeah. So again, you might be pulling this up from your general knowledge or maybe 110 class. So they're from Hinduism. What's their role in Hinduism?
I mean, Indra, I'm not 100% sure, but I know Brahma is one of like the major gods in Hinduism.
Yeah, they both are, in fact. Yeah. So Brahma is, let's say, the creator god, right? They say that he created the world. He created, I'm not going to say everything, but the world, right? Which is pretty good. So Brahma is a creator god. Indra was the king of the gods. Indra, actually, if we want to make kind of a Greek connection, I teach the 110 class. This is what I say in my 110 class. Indra is like Zeus. You guys know Zeus, right? Thunderbolts, kicking everybody's ass. He's the king of the gods. Now, does it look like he's kicking ass here? How would you describe the body language of Indra and Brahma here? What are they doing? Yeah. Cameron says they're praising the Buddha. Adam, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
You're gonna say praising?
Yeah, I was gonna say praising.
Okay, yeah, that's a good word, right? So you put your hands together. I guess this is an emoji, isn't it? Right? So people do this on the internet. They're sort of bowing down, right? Maybe in really it's across all of Asia. In Japan, in particular, there's sort of a custom to bow, right? But I think all of Asia, there's a sense of high is good and pure, and low is sort of lower in a hierarchy. So they are lowering themselves down, right? They are putting themselves below the Buddha. They're respecting or admiring him. Yeah, very good. So if we think about this, again, we started class saying, Buddhists don't really worship gods. That's true, but there are gods. The gods are actually, we're going to see them. They're very important in the life story of the Buddha. They're all over the place. Buddhism kind of develops in the context of Hinduism. Maybe that's even worth so Hinduism, we could say, is first, and then Buddhism comes out from Hinduism. It's almost like Judaism is first, and then Christianity comes out of that context. There's something very similar happening here with Buddhism. And so, in fact, the Buddha is not here to worship the gods. They flip that on its head. And so rather than even saying that the Buddha is God, like Jesus, it's saying the gods worship him, which is crazy, right? But that's what we're seeing here. The gods are worshiping him. Now, again, if we think of Brahma as this creator of the universe, and Zeus as this ass-kicking, thunderbolt-wielding god, why would they ever worship the Buddha?
I think because the gods are a lot of times personified, so they're like people, and I guess they kind of have some of their own enlightenment issues also, as like every other person has, so they could benefit from Buddha's teaching as much as any other person.
Enlightenment issues. I like that. Wait, enlightenment issues. Yeah, yeah. The gods have issues too. That's great, Colin. And so that's kind of the big shift in Buddhism away from Hinduism, right? Is the gods are all over the place. It's polytheistic. Polytheistic. Maybe you've heard of polytheism before, right? Lots of different gods. The Buddha shows up, and I think it was Colin who was just talking. Like Colin said, the gods have their own issues too. The gods suffer too. And so this is the Buddha's major message, let's say, is actually being a god is not all that it's cracked up to be. All right, so there are gods, right? Even from the very beginning, gods are all over the place, in fact. So with the last 25 minutes that we have, let's talk about karma. I was gonna do a breakout session for this, but I think it would take up all of our time. So why don't we not do that? And we can do kind of just a group conversation. What's karma all about? So maybe this is the one I'll put them both in there. So I guess one question is, do you ever use the word karma? And my guess is you've at the very least seen somebody else use it. What do you mean when you say karma? Right? Have you ever experienced karma before? What is karma for people in the United States? If something happens to you, what makes it karma, right? Why do people use that word?
In my experience, it's like what goes around comes around. So if you do something good, good things come back to you. If you do something bad, bad things come back to you. That's how most people use it.
That sounds about right. So what goes around comes around. What goes around comes around. Yeah, it's a very nice phrase, in fact, right? And again, we talked about ethics a moment ago. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, in fact, kind of defines ethics for a lot of people, right? Especially kind of secular, kind of modern people. They don't want to like necessarily say like God is punishing them or God is rewarding them. Obviously, some people do say that, but I think for mostly secular people, they still want some kind of secular ethics, right? And a lot of the time, it kind of comes back to what Catherine just described, this idea like do good things will happen to you, do bad things will happen to you. Does that sound about right to you guys? To the point where it's like, it's become kind of the backbone of our society in a way. Our justice system is built around this idea. If you do bad things, you're going to get punished. And there's also, especially like in our classroom, there's a sense like you do your homework, you come to class, you pay attention, you take some notes, you participate, then you'll be rewarded, right? And you'll get a good grade. And so maybe you can tell from my tone, that things don't always work that way, right? But it's something we kind of strive toward almost, to create a society where good behavior is rewarded and bad behavior is punished. Would you guys agree with me? Yeah. So maybe you're seeing this coming, but Buddhism actually is a little different from that. So even though it's the same word, right? It's the same word, karma. The way that karma operates in Buddhism is a little bit different. It's not totally different. It's related, but again, it's almost like the elephant thing, right? The goes around comes around is one piece of karma, but it is not the whole thing. There's more to karma than that. And I found an article last semester when I was teaching the same topic. It was a little more timely then. It's from October 2020. But in October 2020, then President Trump got COVID. Remember that? We got over it in like a week, and it wasn't that big of a deal. But this was like breaking news, right? So Trump got COVID, and people said it was Trump's karma. And so, it's maybe kind of obvious, but why don't we just make sure we're on the same page? Why would that be karma for Trump to get COVID?
Because he didn't really.
Sorry, I heard a voice and then it disappeared.
because he didn't really wear his mask. So it was like he got it because he wasn't following the rules.
Yeah, exactly. So he didn't wear his mask. He preached about following guidelines. It's sort of ironic. He sort of downplayed it, right? He kept saying like, remember like Easter? He's like, yeah, by Easter, everything will be fine. And of course, by Easter, everything was not fine. But yeah, especially at the beginning, it was just like, it's not that big of a deal. Kung flu, right? Whatever. And so he downplayed it. He says not that big of a deal. And then he got it. And so everybody kind of got excited about that. And then Jonathan Gold wrote this article. And it was an excellent article, to be honest. I can send you the link if you want it. I think it's in the slides, in fact. This is a clickable link. So if you download the slides, you can find it. And Jonathan Gold, he talks about this. Actually, we're not going to read this together, so I'm going to get rid of that. But he talks about it. He begins with this clip from Saturday Night Live. So why don't we watch this clip, just a little piece of it.
The following is a rebroadcast of Tuesday's presidential debate. Even though Tuesday feels like 100 days ago, we thought it was important to see it again, since it might be the only presidential debate. And it was pretty fun to watch, as long as you don't live in America.
Okay, so this is, again, it's sort of a mock presidential debate. You've got Jim Carrey playing Joe Biden. Do you guys know who Jim Carrey is? Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. That was like a hilarious movie when I was a kid. All right, so here's Jim Carrey. I'm going to skip to the end, but here's Jim Carrey talking about Trump getting COVID.
America. Look directly into my eyeballs. You can trust me because I believe in science and karma. Now just imagine if science and karma could somehow team up to send us all a message about how dangerous this virus can be.
And he looks over at Trump, and it's hilarious. Yeah. So this is how the article starts. But Gold takes it kind of to another place. While it is Donald Trump's karma to have contracted COVID-19, and that's the comes around, goes around sort of conversation, right? He was, frankly, being irresponsible. And then he got COVID, and everybody was like, good, cause and effect works. If he didn't get COVID, then, he might still be irresponsible or something like that. In fact, this was kind of the beginning of the end for him. Once he got COVID, all of his lies were very clearly lies, right? Before that, maybe he was on to something. So what goes around comes around, he gets COVID. But this is the more interesting part. It is our collective karma, all of us, to have such a callous and self-centered president in the first place. And to me, that's, again, the more interesting conversation. So what is he talking about? How is it our collective karma? How is Trump America's collective karma? What is Gold talking about here? And by Trump, I mean having Trump be president.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
With that, he's trying to say basically collective karma, like the people that listen to him, that believed in his lies and whatever, basically fell for that trick, and it's all gonna haunt them back now with like a new administration office.
Yeah, excellent. So he didn't come out of nowhere, right? I mean, and hopefully I'm not being too politically divisive right now. I try to give Trump the credit that he is due, right? Part of his skill is he's an excellent storyteller, right? And so even though some of those stories weren't true, he was able to tell stories in a way that were very, alluring, right? He became the savior for, almost half of America, right? Because half of America voted for him. And so he was able to position himself as this really attractive leader. And who was you talking? Was that you, Adam? Your name's Adam?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So just like Adam was saying, right? There's a whole section of America that believed in him, right? That believed the story he was telling, that supported the story that he was telling, that thought, yes, let's make America great again, right? Because that is an appealing story. Nobody wants to not make America great. I want to make America great too, right? It's a great story, right? So great that I even want to wear it on a hat. Maybe not that bad, but you know, yeah, I think you get what I'm saying. And so to kind of pretend like Trump just came out of nowhere, he just kind of waltzed his way into the White House because he cheated or something like that, I think is not giving him very much credit. And it's also, just like Adam was saying, it's not recognizing the pieces of America that came together to create him, right? To allow him to be our president. And the more we pay attention to that, the more we can stop it from happening again, right? Okay, so again, I wanted to do kind of a breakout group for this, but we only have 10 minutes left. So I think that's probably enough of that. Do you guys have any other thoughts on COVID, Trump, karma, and all that sort of thing? Okay, so we still haven't really gotten to, all right, well, what is Buddhist karma all about? So let's spend the rest of class talking about that. And we'll talk about this next time too, because I'm going to ask you guys to write about it, right? So this is actually an important lesson. And again, if we have these assumptions about what karma is, one thing I can see is whether you're open to expanding your definition of karma. So that's what your writing assignment will be for this week. So what is karma? It's actions, but it's also moral actions, right? So it's not just like, you know, anytime you do anything, there's some sort of karmic consequence, because that would be sort of paralyzing, right? Because then you'll just be sort of hiding in your room, not trying to do anything, because if you do anything, it'll have infinite consequences. And that's sort of a scary thought. Can I repeat the assignment? Yeah, so it'll be due Thursday night. So we're gonna go over it together in class on Thursday. But it's on Moodle. So basically, like, everything's on Moodle, assignments on Moodle. So why don't you take a look at it on Moodle, and if you have any questions about it, we can go over in class together. I'm gonna start class with the assignment. So today is sort of getting us ready for it though. It's basically just write a story about karma and analyze that story. Okay, so again, we'll have to know what karma is in order to do that. So karma, they're moral actions. I have this image of the seed and the tree, right? It's this agricultural metaphor that would be very appealing to agricultural societies, right? If I plant an acorn, then an oak tree is going to grow, right? If I plant, I don't know, a seed for a lemon tree or something, an apple tree is not going to grow, right? That's not how seeds work. And so this is how karma became very appealing, I think, is because it's using this very understandable metaphor. You reap what you sow. Have you ever heard that phrase before? You reap what you sow. Now, again, it's agricultural language, and we all live in New York in some capacity, maybe the broader metropolitan area of New York. So what does it mean to sow? Now,
so it was like harvest, I guess.
That's reap. The Grim Reaper, right? What is the Grim Reaper doing? He's reaping up souls and bringing them with him. That's why he's got the scythe. That's another agricultural tool. There's a sense that your soul is ripe and it's time to take it and eat it. He's not going to eat it, but, you know, he takes it away. So sow is the opposite of reap then. So what is sow?
I thought a sow was like a pig.
Ooh, that's a sow. Yeah, I was about to warn you guys. Yeah. So sow, if it's pronounced sow, then it's a female pig. That's right. But to sow is to plant. It's to plant a seed. Agricultural lessons with Dr. Bill. Yeah. So obviously, this sort of language would be very clear for people back in the day, right? We're sort of distant from our agricultural past. But to sow is to plant. So if you sow an act, I guess, first of all, you reap what you sow. Now, hopefully that that metaphor is a bit more clear, right? If you sow a good seed, you're going to get a good result. If you sow a bad seed, you're going to get a bad result. Does that make sense? What goes around comes around. You know, it's what we talked about before. Again, that's not an incorrect way of thinking about it. But there's more to it. So here's a line from the Buddha. I like this quote, so I'm going to put it in the chat. And just to warn you, that quotes will be a part of the exam, right? So again, in a religion class, right and wrong for the big questions, it's a little hard to come down on. But what I can ask you is, where does this quote come from? And so this is a great quote to do that sort of exercise on. I'm not going to make it super difficult, but the goal is to basically say, do you understand this quote? Do you understand this teaching? Do you understand this idea? And so here's kind of a challenging quote, right? It is choice, O monks, that I call karma. Having chosen, one acts through body, speech, or mind. And so, again, I like this quote because there are kind of two parts to it. One is highlighting that we make moral choices, right? If I'm walking along and I step on some ants, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't even see them. That's not going to be a really karmically, there might be a little bad karma. It's kind of hard to calculate these things, but karmically speaking, that's not a terrible thing to do. But the minute I see the ants, right? Maybe little kids who like go out and kill a bunch of ants. How do you think the Buddhists feel about that, killing a bunch of ants? Maybe there's a harder question than I thought. How do you think the Buddhists feel about the systematic killing of ants?
Probably not
They
a
don't
fan.
like doing harm to any sort of animal whatsoever.
Probably not a fan. Don't like doing harm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and why not? This is something we'll talk about in a moment, but reincarnation, right? Remember reincarnation? So there's a sense that you could become an ant one day, right? Those ants have feelings too. Those ants want to stay alive too. And so if you're going around killing all the ants, that's not a very nice thing to do. And so, yeah, that would be karmically bad to kill all these ants. And so, again, just like kind of that simplistic way of thinking about karma, what goes around comes around, here it is, right? You kill a bunch of ants, maybe you'll be reborn as an ant in your next life. And I'm sure there are Buddhist tales that send kind of a similar message that we'll read about for next class. So that's acting with your body, right? Your body can kill an ant, right? That's one way to act with your body. What about with your speech? How do you karmically act with your speech? You guys ever act with your speech?
You like wish harm upon someone else or like think negatively upon someone else.
Yeah, so Brielle actually just covered two of them. So we can wish harm upon other people, or we could even think bad thoughts, right? We can think bad things about other people. So that's speech and mind. So we can curse people. You guys ever curse people? I hope you get into a car accident on this snowy day. No, I don't hope that for anybody. But that would be one way to curse somebody, right? Is to wish harm upon them. You can yell at somebody, right? You guys ever yell at people? It's part of life, right? Sometimes you yell, sometimes you get yelled at. New Yorkers are making karmic speech acts all the time, right? Telling people that they're walking here and whatever, right? So what is a speech act? It's basically when you talk and you affect other people. Does your speech affect other people? Absolutely. And so I think this is actually something we miss in this social media age, right? Is in fact, as we type, as we text, as we communicate in these somewhat distant ways, I'll make my little post here. You guys will read it over there. I don't know how it affects you, right? I don't see your face when I tell you that you're stupid for your hot take or something like that. When I try to dunk on you on Twitter, right? I don't see how that affects you when I dunk on you, but it hurts. It hurts to get dunked on, right? And Twitter, I don't know if you guys use Twitter, but it's kind of a horrible place in a lot of ways, right? It's very toxic, we could say. And I think one reason for that is we don't see how our speech affects each other. It hurts, right? It hurts to make fun of each other, and yet we do it anyway. And then finally, mind is probably the hardest one. Brielle got us started by saying you can think bad thoughts about other people, and I think that's true. Why is that a problem? I don't know about you guys, but I feel like growing up, before I started thinking about Buddhism, I thought my mind was kind of a safe place. I could do whatever I wanted. I could think whatever I wanted. And there would be no consequences, right? There's no thought police. Maybe 1984 tried to make one, but my mind is safe. I can think whatever I want. Why are the Buddhists saying you can sin even in your mind? Why would the Buddhists ever say that?
Because that's how you feel. What you think is how you feel.
What you think is how you feel. Yeah, exactly. So at the very least, you could think bad things. Let's say I think bad things about someone, like Brielle was saying, and then I see that person, and then all of a sudden I might do bad things, right? And it sort of conditions you. It gets your mind ready to start doing those bad things. But I think the Buddhists would say even more than that. The mind itself is capable of acting. Thoughts tend to muster into actions. Yeah, eventually, usually as well. And so, just like Cameron's saying, it's tempting to think the mind will lead to some other sort of act. But the Buddha is very clear here, right? One acts through body, speech, or mind. So I encourage you to keep thinking about this. What does it mean to act with your mind? Maybe I won't hammer it anymore because we only have 3 minutes left. So again, this is very familiar stuff. Do good stuff, don't do bad stuff. What is a bad thing? Is greed, hatred, delusion. This is we'll start next class with this. So if you don't get all this written down, don't worry. But yeah, so a lot of these ethical ideas are probably very familiar. Maybe one last question I can ask before we close up is, how is this different than if there is an omnipotent God, right? So if we take, just very basic Christian theology, there's this idea that, God will reward you, God will punish you, God will test you, right? It all goes back to God. Here, there is no God that's behind karma, right? So how does that make it different? Maybe I'll put it a little bit differently. How does karma help explain and give meaning to suffering? If I'm suffering right now, I can't say, God, why have you forsaken me, right? Because it's karma. There is no God involved, right? So what does karma do? If I'm like, I don't know, I have a really bad headache and I don't know why I have this bad headache. What would karma do to help explain this headache? If we are suffering, did we make someone suffer in the past? Yeah, potentially. No mechanisms to ask for forgiveness. Karma must ride itself out inevitably. Yeah, there's a sense that it kind of comes back to us, right? Even if we don't think like, I did anything bad this week or this month or this year, just like Cameron was saying, we can link it back to a previous life. And so this is key. This is what we're going to go over next time, are the previous lives. But even if we don't understand why we're suffering now, a lot of the time it still comes back to us, which might feel like victim blaming, because it effectively is. But it also, there's something empowering about it too, right? There are kind of two sides to this story. So why don't we end there? We'll start with this same slide, the same idea next time, and then we'll go into previous lives and karma tales. So any last questions or anything? How's that all sound? Sound good? All right. Well, good class today, folks. I know the online class is not ideal, but I think we made it work. That was a good class. So I'm going to post this video to YouTube, and if you missed anything, you can watch it on YouTube. Again, Moodle is your friend. Everything you need is on there. And send me an email if you have any questions, all right?